Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie, and on today's session, we're going to be looking at unlocking digitization for SMEs and how the banks are really seizing this opportunity and maybe look at some of the opportunities that are still there. And joining me, I have three guests who are right at the heart of business banking, and I'm really excited to introduce them. So I'm going to get straight onto it and introduce Dr. Oliver PRILL, the CEO of Tide. Dr. Oliver, how are you doing here today?
We called doctor for a long time. The last time I think it was on an airplane, but people got very worried. But leaving that aside, I'm really well. Airplanes seem like a long time ago, don't they? So we're delighted to be here. I'm the CEO of Tide. Tide is a business finance platform that basically helps small business owners save time and money through their finance and admin. We're about very close to 400,000 members, so UK businesses helping, doing their finance and admin through us. So very excited about this topic and look very much forward to the discussions.
Well, we're honoured to have you on, so thank you so much. I'll call you Oliver henceforth if that's okay with you. If that's
absolutely, I've been called that for a long time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Oliver. And also joining us is Metro Bank's Kat Robinson. Kat, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Kat, for our audience who might not be aware, could you tell us a bit more about your role at Metro Bank, please?
Sure. So I'm Customer Experience Director here at Metro Bank, and Metro Bank was, for those that are less aware of us, the first new high street bank for over 200 years when we were born back in 2010. We're still one of the UK's best challenger banks, and we've got just over 1.2 million customers.
Incredible. And I always love seeing when I cycle through London, if there's a new branch opening and there's a big party, you certainly know about it. And it's, I always love seeing stuff like that, especially in finance. It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And also we've got Adi Engel from VC. Adi, thank you also for joining us here today. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. And also, Adi, for our audience who might not be aware, could you tell us a bit more about Visita and also your role there, please?
Yeah, well, I'm the CMO at Visita. I'm also the person who manages our interactions with the financial sector. And we live in the beyond banking space. So I'm possibly personally the least educated person in the room about banking.
I think I'd probably take that.
Please don't ask me anything about financial management in itself, but what we do is that we're engaging with small businesses for the last 11 and something years now in helping them manage their time, their clients, and their relationship with money. Not so much the business owner's personal relationship with money, but rather the relationship between trading your time and your skill set with getting paid for it, which is the core of 90% of small business owners who are service providers.
Yeah.
And we're a global company. As everyone was flashing numbers here, I will say we have about 1.5 million registered users on our platform.
Absolutely incredible. And Adi, thank you so much for that. And I'm really excited to get that perspective on this conversation, because I think it's really going to shine a light on parts that maybe we might not think about. So thank you so much for joining us here today. Well, I guess to kick things off, Oliver, I think you're right at the heart of this. So I'm going to come straight to you with this. What was the state of banking for small, medium enterprises or SMEs before COVID-19? I don't want to bring it up too much, but I think we've got to lay that groundwork first.
Yeah, I think, COVID, I'm sure we're going to talk about, has been quite a sea change. Although when you look at it, from a bigger perspective, it's really been around accelerating trends, right? So what we saw before COVID is gradual increase in digitalization. So, from a Tide perspective, we saw starting off with more digitally savvy businesses, then going into pre-COVID into, let's say the middle-aged, if you want, more established businesses. And then really what COVID did is they sort of, in many ways, two further sort of dimensions sort of jumped the hurdle. One was cash-rich businesses. So there were a lot of businesses that in the past used the high street bank because, honestly, depositing cash next door was a great proposition. in COVID, I think many of us didn't use cash, and maybe those that did, that going into a bank may not have been the wisest thing while the virus was around. So that sort of caused, a further push in digitization. And then also with that, I think the general advent of e-commerce and general sort of acceleration of digitalization caused, let's say, more mature business owners, so 50s, 60s, 70s, really going digital and then saying, well, why don't I get a current account, right? And so we really saw, in my mind, a sort of 3 to 4 year acceleration of digitization, and that's probably going to be the longest sort of lasting trend. There were lots of other things around, financing and so on that we may want to speak about, but that I would call out as the big one, a big step forward and a huge acceleration.
Yeah, it's not often you hear in finance something jumping 3 or 4 years ahead in a couple of months, is it? That really is a change. And with that in mind, then, Kat, if we've noticed that 3 to 4 year change in a couple of months, what stands out to you as being the biggest change when it comes to that changing role of SME banking?
I think I agree with everything Oliver's just said. I think my build on that would be, I think pre-COVID, small businesses were kind of feeling really let down by their banks, actually. So I think, has been a problem for years that banks have traditionally kind of neglected small businesses and their needs and some of the things they want from a bank. And I think running a small business is incredibly hard. And perhaps I'm running a small business because I want to be a hairdresser or a carpenter or an accountant or what have you. And maybe I look to my bank to help me manage my business and manage my money. And there were lots of things I think that people were looking for their banks to do that they weren't. And I think then in terms of what's changed, so I agree with the point about the move to digital, absolutely. I think through COVID, a couple of things have happened for small businesses. So there's some real green shoots. So, we've all read the stats about the number of small businesses that actually were started during COVID, people who were made redundant or had more time on their hands.
Yeah.
And use that time to start a business. Fabulous. But I think there's also lots of businesses who are still struggling actually and need kind of tailored help and support. As some of the government schemes have stepped back, we're certainly seeing that. And I think they're absolutely a role for digital, but I also think human relationships and people value people, and kind of putting our arms around some of those businesses to help them get back on their feet is also really important.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, then, Adi, if I could come to you and ask, really, we've heard two really interesting parallels there, and you've got to have that human element, you've got to have that digital element, but it seems like the industry is moving in the right direction. Can I get your perspective for the SMEs? What were some of the biggest bugbears, or sorry for the idiom, the issues that they had pre-COVID-19, and do you think some of them have been tackled? And would it be fair to say, I'm going to throw in another question, would you say that cash flow was the ultimate issue there?
Well, very hard to say that, things that are not related to cash flow, if that makes sense. Because
yes,
when we're looking at small businesses, you can tie everything to cash flow. Is it about how am I better utilizing my time to service more clients, and how am I chasing them for their payments? How am I creating a financial buffer for myself? How am I reporting on all of this? And I think a lot of the solutions, the digital solutions that are evolving, are around having that 360 view of your cash flow, and putting it in the context of your business, not just, let me go into my account, check my balance, then let me go into my accounting system, check what's due, then let me go to my potential lender and let them know that this is my balance and that's what I'm due. So possibly I have an opportunity here to get to get lending. But in terms of, from an outsider's perspective, I think what we do see is that there was, I think, a sea change, but that possibly was a little bit before COVID, where a lot of the banking industry realized that digital is first and foremost an opportunity for the bank. They wanted to disrupt the traditional way that things were done. They wanted to create better customer experiences. They wanted to reduce costs for themselves, and first and foremost, become more efficient. What has probably not happened at the time is that the small business owners, the customers, needed to catch up with that digital transformation, and they needed to now speak the digital language to, when there wasn't a branch to there, you couldn't no longer come to the your local branch with your best suit, meet the branch manager that and that essentially they would vouch for you that you're eligible for a loan, which is how things used to be. So I think what we are seeing right now is kind of the small business owners are now having to catch up with the ecosystem and make sure that their records are digital, and then therefore they can share it with the bank, or that and we've seen that in the US, for example, where a huge percentage of the small businesses who applied to the PPP scheme, the loans the government was offering through banks, couldn't actually get approved because there wasn't a good record of their existence as a business.
Wow.
So I think a lot of times we're talking about, how digital enables the small business to, offer better services, be more efficient, chase down whatever they need to, get rid of most of the administrative side of things, but it also creates a byproduct of an actual record of their existence. And that actual record of their existence is something that I think the need of this became more prominent during COVID. And that's very, very interesting transition for me.
Yeah, and I think it's such a brilliant perspective. We so often on this show, we look at maybe some a kind of bit of lethargy from implementing digital strategies from institutions because of their size, but actually you see a lot of SMEs, they are also hamstrung by their ability to innovate because of the lack of time that they have. They're time poor, and it's interesting that we find in this vertical of finance, we're seeing this balance where actually the customer is taking a time to digitize themselves to make use of what the bank is able to provide. And I think that's so exciting to think, because it shows the banks are really on it. And with that in mind, then one thing that we have been bringing up slightly, and I kind of twisted the question slightly by asking about cash flow. Oliver, if I could come to you and ask, looking at payment visibility and clarity, how important is that for both the banks and both the SMEs at the same time, to be able to know where their customer is, but also for the small business to also know where their money is going?
I think it's essential. I think not COVID related, but most small businesses, they would love to, usually don't have the capacity to build up a lot of buffering. From the credit point of view, we do know that there is 1/3 that do have a lot of cash, right? And so for them, it's really about digitization, it's about saving time, etc. So business like IT contractor, if you want an avatar. You have 1/3 that are inherently credit unworthy. So actually, whatever people say, actually credit is actually not the right solution for them, because it would make matters worse. But they can be helped a lot on the cash flow side by what Adi was saying around tools and processes to help them see their positioning, manage it better. Because often this third of businesses fall over, even though they're inherently credit unworthy. A lot of what kicks them out is the unpaid invoice, the unwritten, the invoice not written on time, the invoice not chased, maybe some of the expenses paid too early. It's that sort of thing on 1/3. And then 1/3 are credit worthy. And for them, a lot of the cash flow is around making sure that they, they can actually leverage this credit that is available to them for working capital, but also for investment purposes. Right, so there are very different segments in our view in SME. And again, when we try to speak about SME, we really mean the micro, right, which is really no formalized finance functions. So you're really relying either on the owner or their trusted lieutenant to sort of do the legwork. Right, that's very different to, in our view, to the maybe large, small, or even mid-sized businesses who sort of have a character, have an organized finance function, and therefore are much more corporate-like, maybe not in financial standing, but in terms of organizational capability than a micro business. So, we look at these three segments and we see very different needs for support. But absolutely, cash flow cuts across all three of them.
Interesting. And with that in mind, I think that's going to be so exciting, seeing that go on into the future. And with that in mind, then when you look at innovations happening in the payments industry, it seems to be ever constantly changing, but also we're seeing global standards change at the same time. And with that in mind, then I'm just going to kind of focus on the same question that Oliver brought up, Kat, if I could come to you as well. But looking at that payment visibility as well, we're seeing we're seeing medium-sized businesses and even actually some small businesses send payments cross-border now. And we're seeing payments change in ways that have never really been seen before COVID. So with that in mind, how important are payments being connected to customer experience going forward?
I think that I think that there's a lot we can do to better help our customers through some of that visibility and clarity, and maybe some less obvious things. So for example, we will be better able to identify when our customers need some help, actually. So maybe when customers are struggling and need some help, which might be financial management support, it might be kind of support to their broader financial well-being, or equally where we can help. So to the credit point, I know that Oliver raised before, because we have all this data, we should no longer have to ask a customer, what their father-in-law's inside leg measurement is when they're applying for a loan, because we should know, because we have this wealth of data. So I think it's also thinking beyond the kind of the obvious in terms of payments, kind of some of the extra things we can do with that information to really help and support customers.
Yeah, I
think it's quite exciting.
Yeah,
really help small businesses.
And with that in mind, then Adi, you and I have already brought up earlier in this conversation that SME owners are typically time poor, and obviously customer experience is right at the heart of that. So how critical do you guys see it at Visita as ease of use being the critical element to a lot of these innovations? Because it's brilliant having the financial product right there, but also I'm guessing is customer experience also the key offering at that point as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we in enterprise language, you would normally refer to Visita as a CRM, which is something that we would never use talking to our customers. But if you think about the traditional CRM and how does it serve an enterprise, it's about creating these constructs where there is this opportunity, it's now delivered from the sales department into the legal department, and then it goes to the billing department, and then there are this many billing events that have to be set up. When we're looking at a small business, we have to understand that they are doing all of this, but within a few seconds or a snap judgment. Sometimes I was once asked whether our product has a lead scoring mechanism into it, and I said yes, normally it would be that business owner picking up the phone, listening to the voice of the person on the other side and saying, okay, yes, I can serve this person, I'm free on Wednesday. So that's we're condensing a lot of decision making, a lot of different business models as well into a very small app. Last time we counted, we had upwards of 200 individual features that we needed to deliver to a small business owner packaged in a mobile app. So yes, it's absolutely a huge customer experience challenge. But what I do feel is that once you drive those experiences based on value, and that is the key. And I often say, we hear a lot of people saying digitalization has a high entry point, and a lot of potentially people who are less digitally savvy or technically savvy won't get it. And I always say, but you wait till you see my now late, unfortunately, grandparents using WhatsApp. So as soon as they realized that WhatsApp is their way of engaging with their grandchildren, suddenly there was a clear value into this whole thing, and they were very happy to engage with it. So possibly from a customer experience perspective, are we asking them to do a lot of stuff, set up a lot of different tools, upload a lot of data into it before we are actually telling them why? Or is there a very clear onboarding where we say, okay, this is where you're going to have a list of all of your clients. As you are offering them services, this is how you're going to ask for a payment, and therefore that direct link has direct value to them. And I think absolutely, it's still very difficult. We have to, work on our screens all the time, but at the same time, a lot of people are happy to engage with such apps and such UX because they understand that there's, their ability to get paid, or their life balance, work-life balance, their sleeping hours at the end of the day. If they've achieved any new free time at the end of the day, then that's worth it to them. And so that's what should drive the customer experience as well.
Yeah. It's such an important thing, and to use that kind of time that, as you said, sleeping time is going to be so important for all these organizations. And it's an amazing thing to think that, we've gotten to the point of digitization where we can think about that. How can you act on time where you're not even active? Now, Kat, one thing that comes to mind when I think of customer experience is always Metro Bank. You guys have a very customer forward organization. So how do you guys at Metro Bank look to improve financial well-being for these businesses that we've been discussing?
So I think it's definitely, so I agree with the point about time. So I think there's absolutely a point about improving customer experience so that we can make life easier for our customers and kind of take that burden away from small businesses and take it on ourselves. So make it easier to do your banking, kind of manage your business. But I also think, as I kind of mentioned earlier on, I think there's something around how we succeed together and support small businesses and support that financial well-being, be that through, budgeting tools and support we can provide, be it through connecting them to other businesses like them, providing kind of support and events, in our stores and virtually through partnerships we have, etc. I think there's something about supporting small businesses in the round that moves beyond just saving them time. Definitely.
Yeah, and there's so much to cover because SMEs do filter into pretty much every vertical. So there's so many various different issues that might be at play. So it's almost a thankless task. Now, Oliver, as obviously being a very digital native organization, I imagine you're very much at the forefront of seeing new demands from quite tech savvy SME owners or creators. So while we're still on the subject of customer experience, what new demands are you seeing that you can give insights to our audience about the changing demands from SME owners when it comes to business banking?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not sure whether they're new, right? I think they're just getting more intense. I think in the end, whether it's around time or convenience, intuitiveness, I think it's these sorts of things. I think the fundamental thesis we have at Tide, and we do see it coming through, but it may be self-fulfilling prophecy because these become our customers, right? Is really that the real thing why business banking is broken is that we believe actually business banking is the wrong definition. Let me explain what I mean with that. What you do is that a business doesn't do business banking, right? What it does, it writes an invoice, it may need to factor the invoice, it chases the invoice, it needs to account for the invoice. The invoice needs to be attached to the payments, etc. So really what all these workflows a small business has, and I completely agree with Adi, they're actually often not different people doing their workflow, the same person. They cut across different products, and many of them technically cut outside banking. That's where the thing is broken. So the thing we at Tide try to do is we relentlessly try to focus on this connectivity, right? So everything flows and works seamlessly together. And this could be for very many reasons. And this is why people demand it. First of all, people are not in business to do finance and admin. It's a necessary evil. I mean, maybe with the exception of accountants and IFAs and so on, that try to go into the finance. Most business owners, almost all business owners I've ever spoken to, don't like finance and admin. Right? And so it's a necessary evil. Many of them are not particularly good at it and they don't have time for it, right? And so the way we think that it's best solved is by everything working seamlessly together, everything being connected. And we see that if you ask me about what is changing, we've seen this for a while now, but I think us people have better digital experiences across the sort of digital universe, right? So from anything else they use, Adi sort of gave the example of WhatsApp, which is very intuitive, right? people no longer have the time, will no longer spend time to learn. Everything has to work. The standard is very high, and they get very upset very quickly when things don't work well together. And so the thing we really see is, rather than new demands, we see really raising demands, right? The requirement gets ever higher, and it gets ever more demanding, and there's very little sympathy for things not working well and not working well together, right? So that's probably the biggest trend that we are seeing in terms of changing preferences or enhanced preferences.
Yeah, it goes back, when I was saying it's almost a thankless task, because it's gotten to the point where no longer is someone going to be banking with the same organization for their whole lives just because they banked with them before. We've entered into this whole new paradigm where actually it's a very consumer focused market, and they can have that decision. And Adi, obviously, you brought up the instance of WhatsApp as Oliver also mentioned there. But I'm interested, do you also see these as not new demands? Do you agree with Oliver, or is there a bit of both? Are there some new demands, as we're seeing, for instance, WhatsApp is now being, if you don't offer it, are people going to find that weird?
Yeah, well, I think I've heard a saying today about academic research, and one of the researchers said there are a lot of simple models, just not a lot of simple people. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do is we are trying to put a huge segment that's 90% of the population, over 50% of employers in any economy, into a box and say, are they asking us for more? I would say what's going on at the moment is yes, there is a lot more understanding of what is a simple customer experience, and people know how to use things, so they will get more frustrated with us if we're not helping them with things. At the same time, I also see often patience with models that are completely, legacy concepts, because, people don't like to change, because people are afraid of change, because it's easier for me to stick to my pen and paper than try to do this new thing. So I also see some frustration with us badgering them to, you should digitalize, you should do. I think one of the things that we are about to see is a resurgence of the use of cash, for example, that was very appropriately and very rightly thrown out of the window as soon as the pandemic hit. But, at the same time, did people do this willingly? And are they now kind of even possibly nostalgically looking back at the fun days where they were sitting in, at the cash register and taking cash? So I think there is it's, I guess, tide comes to mind as a concept, but an ebb and flow of what people are looking for. When are they willing to take it from you? And, are you more helping them than frustrating them at any given point? Hard to box that into a single kind of trend.
Yeah. But
definitely the ongoing trend is definitely going towards, just give us a good solution. Stop bothering us with your competitiveness. Stop expecting us to compare all of you and find the different, unique properties to each of you. Can't you just work together and give us a good solution? I as a partner oriented organization, we see that all the time, where the expectation is that as an ecosystem, we will stop demanding more of their time by showing them all kinds of different solutions, but rather, give them a single unified voice. And that is something I think also creates some level of frustration from our potential customers.
That's interesting. It's almost that, it goes back to that whole notion that, obviously if these business owners are time poor, they might not actually be fully aware of all the different products that they could access. But almost on the other end, why are some organizations offering some products and others nowhere near that same offering? That must be quite a minefield, especially if you don't have a lot of time to be shopping around with that. Now, Adi, you've kind of brought up my next question, and that was really going to be like, what is the future of SME banking going to look like? And Kat, I'm really interested, obviously, because Metro Bank, you've got such a brilliant, brick and mortar established base, and a customer can come and actually, especially if it's a big problem that they need to have, and operate in that new cash future, as Adi was mentioning. What does the future of SME banking look like? And do you agree with Adi? There's going to be that back to cash and have that face-to-face interaction.
So I think some of the trends that we've seen over the last 18 months, I think will stick. To Oliver's point, maybe some will go back a little bit. So I think we're absolutely seeing more demand from customers for digital products and services, absolutely. But I think there are a chunk of customers who still value, human, seeing a person, and would like to come back and see us in person. Absolutely not all of them. And so I think the demand from customers, to Adi's point, actually born out of perhaps experience of other verticals. Well, I can do this with my telecom provider. Why can't I do it with you through digital channels? Absolutely. Yeah. I think maybe a slight move back to human, because people value people. Not sure on cash. I think, like I said, it will be interesting with a kind of payments ecosystem more broadly, kind of where that goes. I think we've definitely, with things like contactless limits going up and kind of other forms of payments becoming more mainstream, not sure whether, not convinced customers will go completely back to cash in the UK. But I think my other thought on that one, again, just on the previous point about demands and what that means from a customer experience perspective, is I think small businesses are increasingly kind of facing quite a lot of a regulatory burden actually of their own. So again, in the UK, things like making tax digital, that was postponed because of COVID. But I think there's lots of new things that small businesses are being asked to do from a government regulatory perspective, which means they will expect more of their banks, I think, quite rightly. So, I've got to do this thing called digital tax now. Help me, you are my bank, help me do that and make that easier for me. So I think probably plays to the make life easier, but I think, again, helping small businesses succeed, connecting small businesses with each other, and perhaps, digital, but with that human touch, for me, is definitely where I kind of see things going.
But it's almost an alien thought, but it's like everyone should be having their own personal CFO, or at least any business of any size, their bank will be providing that role of looking after the finances, being like, you need to do the tax, we can help you with that, and that's going to be a really quite lovely future, I feel. And to me, that speaks a lot about fintech in general. It's enabling organizations that maybe never had access or the funds or the organization to a CFO, and then suddenly their bank can provide that role. And I think that's really exciting. Really balanced argument there in terms of seeing a bit of balance between both cash and also face-to-face, but also digital. So I guess, Oliver, to kind of wrap things up then, I'm also really excited to hear your perspective in terms of where the future of SME banking goes. I know you're coining the term that you almost don't want to look at it like business banking. It's something different. Where's that going to go in the future?
So I think we see sort of a couple of trends, right? So first of all, I think the whole notion that there was one model of old, right, the universal bank, and there will be one model in the future, I think is a thesis we don't subscribe to. If you look outside banking, any healthy market has a variety of business models, right, that basically people can choose. Look at retail, right? Some of them are horizontal, some of them are vertical, some of them are digital, very, very high street oriented, etc. And I think, we certainly subscribe to the thesis that actually the best outcome for SMEs is that they can choose on a variety of different propositions, right? So, I wouldn't sit here and say that Tide model is something that works. By the way, just for the record, we subscribe to a limited degree to the personal touch. For example, we have, phone service. You can actually, with a higher grade of upgrades, can have a personal account manager. Well, we don't have branches, but I'm with Mr. Cat. I wouldn't sit here and say I don't see branches. So people are saying, by 2040, all the branches will be dead. I'm not sure. There may be a different form. Some of them may be shared, etc. But I think the richness, the key thing that I would say is SME is a very, very diverse sector. People have very different needs, they're very different industries, they're different level of sizes, different demands, and they will need different propositions. And so, we are a strong advocate of, diversity in propositions. That's, I think, what will happen. There will not be one model that will succeed. There will be a variety of models. And if not, then it needs to be further government intervention. As far as cash is concerned, that was your more specific question. I think we do monitor that quite a bit. We saw complete dry up of cash during the pandemic. We now saw some of it coming back. It's at much lower levels. And also the interesting thing is, to Kat's point, is also the way cash is used is very different. The interesting thing is, and so this is a very moot point, but before the pandemic, we saw a lot of small cash transactions. That seems to interestingly have largely gone away. But I think with the higher contactless limit in the UK, plus people all being used to it, you're almost like if you're at a coffee shop and you try to pay cash, people look at you while you're blocking the queue, right? It's that sort of thing where maybe a few years ago, it would have been the other way around, right? Why are you making complicated card payment? So I think that the way to use cash is also very different. We do know there's some not so great use cases for cash. That probably will make cash has a long way to go. But we certainly wouldn't subscribe to cash coming back in a big way. But there will be for a long time a long tail on cash. So diverse business models with some continued role of cash.
Yeah,
be my bet for the future.
And well, I think that remains what has been resonated throughout the whole conversation. Is it seems that there's a wealth of choice, not just from customer experience options and ways of onboarding, but also ways of paying, and payment channels are evolving, and having that choice is key to enabling SMEs to thrive. So I've got to say a massive thank you to all three of you, Kat, Adi, Oliver. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We actually have come to time. So I've just got to say a massive thank you to you, and also obviously our audience as well. Thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series over at ffnews.com and of course YouTube, but especially LinkedIn, of course, where you'll see me in the comments. And so lastly, Kat, Adi, Oliver, thank you so much and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for having us.